In this video, we will explore how to combine masks to make complex masks. So we're starting off here in the phase map, and I've already opened up the mask editor, as you can see, or the universal toolbar at least. I'll start by opening up the tools, the layer tools, and selecting the mask tree, which is a good starting point. Next, I will open up the mask editor and bring up the mask tools here that are shown. Now, as pointed out in an earlier video, when you have pre-filtered out data, you get a gray area. And here I'm showing we're using a 98% aperture mask, and that is shown here as the gray area that's been removed. So let's begin by creating a couple masks. I will create a square mask first, or rectangle. So I click, drag, click again, and now I have created that mask. I click on it and I can position it where I want. Notice the mask tree has illuminated again. It's been, when it's highlighted, it's selected here as shown by the handles, or I can click here on the object itself and the handles show up. So that's one mask. Let's add another one. Let's add a circular. So I click on that icon, come into the area of the data, I click to hold a center, and then I can adjust it to where I want, and then I will click to complete the mask. And again, by clicking anywhere in that area, I can move it at will, so I can move it to where I want. So now we have two exclude masks, which are the default starting position for all masking. And by clicking on both of them, you can see, I'll click on both of them in the mask tree, and I can highlight both, and I can move them independently still as I click each one. So they're, even though they're both clicked, they're still independent as I grab them. So just because they're both highlighted doesn't mean they're going to move together as a group. The way you group masks is to select both of them again by holding Shift key down as you click on them in the mask tree. And then you have these combination operators here. You have the sum or the union. You have the product or the intersection. And then you have the exclusive sum, which is the opposite of what you would get if you do the product. So let's go through those. Now let's take this customer mask, and we're going to make it into from an exclude into an include. So we click on the sum, which clicks on both of them, and be careful not to click, let's say, on the circular and take this operation. You want to click on the sum. You want to act on the entire thing. And you go to the black, half white circle, which inverts whatever the mask is. We're going to invert it, and now it's an include mask. We will close the mask editor, and there it is, this odd shaped mask that we have. So reopen it. Now you can also click on this sum, each individual. So we have a sum, but we can click on it individually as shown here on the mask tree. We're only getting one or the other. And that actually allows us to reposition it without taking those two apart. So I'm just going to move this down. And we're going to close the mask editor, and now it's this new shape, but it's still combined. As you can see here, it's still the same group. And if I take that group, which I just happen to select it by selecting the sum, this 2, and it's an inverted sum, I can then grab it and manipulate it as a group. So this gives you a lot of power over the masking. Once you create these complex masks, you can resize them and change shape as required. And this might be important with different size parts that you might encounter. So let's start with this combination mask and look at the different ways of combining. So first off, I am going to take this inverted connected mask, and first I'm going to go back to being regular, not inverted, okay? Because I want to take us back to where we were at the beginning. And then I'm going to unlink them, which this tool here is the break tool. So by clicking that, I'll click them, I'll break them apart. So now they're two independent masks and they only work in that manner. So let's go back on each of these and let's go and see what they are. And as you see, they're now exclude masks, which is what they'd be if we first created them. How does this function work? Because you'll notice if I take this mask and I'm going to invert it, and then I'm going to take this mask and I invert it, and then I say, oh, let's combine them into a group, and I say, let's just put them together. That's the sum, right? You're going to sum these two, and then you look at the result, you'll notice that it's not what you expect. And the reason for that is the masking in reveal follows set theory rules, not just combining different shapes. And the reason for that is so we can create these groups of masks that have very complex shapes as they are required. So how do we combine these two into a group? So if we have two exclude masks, which could be considered the basic mask, they're not inverted, or the complement as would be in set theory, we can take, and by De Morgan's rule, we can, if you have an exclude mask, two of them, and you want to combine them, you do the union or the sum. So exclude masks, you sum them. So let's take and show that by selecting both, and then we're going to sum them, and then we're going to close this, and yes, it's true. Now they are continuing to be two exclude masks combined, which of course allows us to manipulate them still individually, but also if we click on the sum, we can manipulate that as a group. Now if we want to create this into an include mask, we can click on the inversion, and then we show that now we have an include mask. So the steps to get to an include mask that's a combination, first off, is create two masks, which are both exclude, do the sum, bring them together, and then invert. So that's the method. Create them as excludes, sum them, and then invert. Now let's back up again to where we were at the beginning. Let's get rid of this sum. Actually, we can get rid of the invert if we want. We can get rid of the sum by delinking them. And now we're back to where we were at the beginning, which we have two exclude masks. Well, what if we did an include, which would be inverting that one, and now we're going to do an include here on the circle. And so we have two include masks. Now if you think about this, it's including everything inside here and excluding everything outside. Whereas this mask is doing the same, it's including everything inside of it and excluding everything outside. So when you look at them in combination, which is shown here, because the rectangle is excluding everything outside of it, parts of the circle which are outside of it are also excluded. And so the only thing included in this case is where they are overlapping. So in a sense, this is a union, looks like a union, which you'll see if we did a union of these, which is a sum, you end up with only this small area, which is the areas in combination which are not excluding. So if you want to sum two inverted masks, which are the includes, the proper approach is the intersection, which is De Morgan's second rule. And so let's take the sum and we'll break it apart. And just looking at this quickly, you'll see that it's the same because they're already excluding everything outside of them, and the only inclusion is the overlap. But this time we're going to say, let's look at the intersection of these two times the product. So we're going to do a product of these two masks, and now we get the entire mask. So De Morgan's rules are what control how masks are combined. And if you look at the steps, and here we showed the steps being, if you create two standard masks, which are excludes. Then you convert them to include masks, which are shown here now by inverting them. To combine them to show the entire area, you need to do a product or a intersection of those two. And this is where most confusion comes with reveal masking, because you need to follow De Morgan's rules when you're combining masks. So what if we want to add a third mask, shown here as this exclude ellipse, into this mix? And so we're going to grab it and we're going to move it. So now we got a very strange mask. And as you'll see when we close it, it is strange indeed. But we want to combine this. Does it matter how we combine these? Well, the answer is no, because again, by set theory, the commutative laws all apply, as well as the associative law. So we can select this rectangle plus this circle, and we can combine them into a union. And then we can take that elliptical mask plus the sum, and we could do that union. Or we could have done that in the different order where we put the circle with the ellipse first and then the other. And the same goes for intersections. It doesn't matter which order you make, because the commutative laws apply. And now that we have these three masks all combined, if we wanted to make that an include, we can do that. Shown here, we're now looking at that inner area. And finally, if we wanted to manipulate this as a group, we click here on the sum, and now we have complete control over scale and rotation and, of course, position. Of course, you can always create very odd masks, which is shown here, Apre's logo, which is simply two rectangles and a polygon combined, and they've been summed together. And so now it's an exclude mask as shown here in the part. And we can save that by clicking on it and then saving it. And we already have it there, but it's okay, we'll overwrite it. And then we'll erase it just so that we can show you how we can load it in. And now if we look at that, it's all there. Click back, go here to load. We're going to load, we're going to double click on that. And there it is again, brought right back where it was with the name. So the mask is saved with its name, position, and its shape. And again, because it's a summed mask, we have all the control over it. We can do rotations here and scaling off of the plot itself, the image, or we can move things via the X and Y positions.